get there eventually. Sorry about this, folks. I don't really understand what the problem seems to be, but it keeps happening every fucking week. I'm getting rather tired of it, frankly. Um, I'll do another check over my hardware, see if that's got anything to do with it. It shouldn't, but, buggered if I know. Anyway, yeah, break again. I double dog dare you. I double dog dare you. Break again right on me. I will vent bile. Maybe I should try turning off virus protection. I don't fucking know. Anyway, let's get back to it, where we got interrupted. Because it better not become a recurring theme. So I only went about 3 pages without noticing. Here we go. Generals didn't steal liquor. They were early to bed, early to rise, always brushing their teeth after every meal, never skipping a morning shave. Goddamned messiahs. Generals went into battle facing death with their chins held high, calm as you please. Hell, all they had to do was sit back in Nagano drawing up their battle plans. One order from them and us mortals on the front lines would move like pawns across a chessboard to our grisly fates. I'd like to see just one of them here with us in the mud. We had our own rules down here, which is probably why they stayed away. Hell, if one of them showed, I'd see to it a stray bullet put them on the KIA list. This was the least damning thought running through my head, any one of which would have been enough to send me to a firing squad. The brass in the tent weren't the only spectators around to watch our torture. The guys in 4th Company were really laughing it up. A while back we beat them in an intramural rugby match by more than 30 points, so I guess they felt that this was some sort of twisted payback. The liquor we'd swiped was for them, too, so this display of solidarity was touching. What a bunch of assholes. If they got into trouble on Oh my god. If they got into trouble on Kotoyushi, I sure as hell wasn't going to bail them out. The U.S. Spec Ops and some journalist embedded in their squad had gathered around the field to watch us from a safe distance. Maybe they didn't do ISO push-ups where they came from, but whatever the reason, they were pointing their fat fingers at us and laughing. The breeze coming off the water picked up their voices and dumped them on us. Even at this distance, the commentary was loud and grating. Fingernails on a chalkboard grating. Oh man, is that a camera? Is he seriously taking pictures? All right, that's it, motherfucker. You're next on my KIA list. Pain and fatigue racked my body. My blood pumped slow as lead. This was getting old. Counting my dream, this was the 2nd time I'd endured this particular session of PT. Not just PT, ISO push-ups. In training, they taught us that even when you're in excruciating pain, especially when you're in pain, the best thing to do was to find some sort of distraction, something else to focus on other than the burning in your muscles and the sweat streaking down your forehead. Careful not to move my head, I looked around out of the corner of one eye. The American journalist was snapping pictures, a visitor's pass dangling from his neck. Say cheese! He was a brawny fellow. You could line him up with any of those U.S. Special Forces guys and you'd never know the difference. He'd look more at home on a battlefield than I would, that's for sure. I got the same vibe from those Special Forces guys that I got from Sergeant Farrell. Pain and suffering were old friends to men like them. They walked up to the face of danger, smiled, and asked what took 'em so long to get there. They were in a whole nother league from a recruit like me. In the middle of the testosterone display, the lone woman stuck out like a sore pinky. She was a tiny little thing standing off by herself a short distance from the rest of the squad. Seeing her there beside the rest of her super-sized squad, something seemed out of whack. Anne of Green Gables goes to war. I figure the book would be a spin-off set around World War I. Mongolia makes a land grab, and there's Anne, machine gun tucked daintily under one arm. Her hair was the color of rusted steel, faded to a dull red. Some redheads conjured up images of blood, fire, deeds of valor. Not her. If it weren't for the sand-colored shirt she was wearing, she'd have looked like some kid who'd come to the base on a field trip and gotten herself lost. The others were fanned out around this girl, who barely came up to their chests, like awed medieval peasants gawking at nobility. Suddenly it hit me. That's Rita. It had to be. It was the only way to explain how this woman, who couldn't have looked less like a jacket jockey if she had been wearing a ball gown, was in the company of the Spec Ops. Most women who suited up looked like some sort of cross between a gorilla and an uglier gorilla. They were the only ones who could cut it on the front lines in the armored infantry. Rita Vrataski was the most famous soldier in the world. Back when I signed up for the UDF, you couldn't go a day without seeing the news feeds sing her praises. Stories titled, "A Legendary Commando," "Valkyrie Incarnate," that sort of thing. I'd even heard Hollywood was going to make a movie about her, but I was already in the UDF by the time it came out, so I never saw it. About half of all the mimic kills humanity had ever made could be attributed to battles her squad had fought in. In less than 3 years, they'd slaughtered as many mimics as the whole UDF put together had in the 20 years before. Rita was a savior descended from on high to help turn the odds in this endless, losing battle. That's what they said, anyway. We all figured she was part of some propaganda squad they were using to make inroads into enemy territory. A front for some secret weapon or new strategy that really deserved the credit. 60% of soldiers were men. That figure shot up to 85% when you started talking about the jacket jockeys who were out bleeding on the front lines. After 20 years fighting an enemy whose identity we didn't even know, losing ground day by day, we grunts didn't need another muscle-bound savior who grunted and sweat and had hamburger for brains like we did. Yeah, if it were me calling the shots in the General Staff office, I'd have picked a woman too. Wherever the U.S. Spec Ops were deployed, morale soared. The UDF had been beaten to the cliff's edge, but they were finally able to start moving back from the brink. After finishing the war in North America, they moved on to Europe and then North Africa. Now they'd come to Japan, where the enemy was knocking on the door of the main island of Honshu. The Americans called Rita the Full Metal Bitch, or sometimes just Queen Bitch. When no one was listening, we called her Mad Wargarita. That's like margarita if you replaced mar with war. Margarita. Mad Wargarita. Rita's jacket was as red as the rising sun. She thumbed her nose at the lab coats who'd spent sleepless months refining the jacket's polymer paint to absorb every last radar wave possible. Her suit was gunmetal red. No, more than that. It glowed. In the dark it would catch the faintest light, smoldering crimson. Was she crazy? Probably. Behind her back, they said she painted her suit with the blood of her squad. When you stand out like that on the battlefield, you tend to draw more than your share of enemy fire. Others said she'd stop at nothing to make her squad look good, that she even took cover behind a fellow soldier once. If she had a bad headache, she'd go apeshit, killing friend and foe alike. And yet not a single enemy round had ever so much as grazed her jacket. She could walk into any hell and come back unscathed. They had a million stories. Your rank-and-file soldier ended up with a lot of time on his hands, and listening to that sort of talk, passing it on, embellishing it, that was just the sort of thing he needed to kill time and to keep the subject off of dead comrades. Rita had been a jacket jockey eating and sleeping on the same base as me, but I'd never seen her face until that moment. We might have resented the special treatment she got, if we'd had the chance to think about it. I couldn't take my eyes off the line of her hair. She wore it short, as it bobbed in the wind. There was a graceful balance to her features. You might even have called her beautiful. She had a thin nose, a sharp chin. Her neck was long and white, where most jacket jockeys didn't even have necks. Her chest, however, was completely flat, at odds with images of Caucasian women you saw plastered on the walls of every barracks cell. Not that it bothered me. Whoever had looked at her and thought up the name Full Metal Bitch needed to have his head checked. She was closer to a puppy than a bitch. I suppose, even in a litter of pit bulls, there's room for one sweet one in the bunch. If, in my dream, the shell of that red jacket had popped open and she'd climbed out, I would have shit my bunk. I'd seen her face and jacket plenty on the news feeds, but they never gave you a good idea of what she really looked like in person. I had always pictured Rita Vrataski as tall and ruthless, with a knockout body and an air of total self-confidence. Then our eyes met. I looked away immediately, but it was already too late. She started walking toward me. She moved with purpose, one foot planted firmly on the ground before the other moved, a relentless, unstoppable force. But her steps were small, the net result being a harried, flustered gait. I'm not sure I'd ever seen anyone walk quite like that before. Come on, don't do this to me. I can't even move. Give a guy a break and get lost, would you? Go on, get! Rita stopped. The muscles in my arms started to tremble. Then, purposefully, she walked away. Somehow she'd heard my prayer, making a 90-degree turn right in front of me and heading toward the brigadier general where he sat under the tent. She snapped a perfunctory salute. Not so sloppy as to be insulting, but not so stiff you could hear anything cracking either. A fitting salute for the full metal bitch. The brigadier general cast a doubtful glance at Rita. Rita was a sergeant major. In the military hierarchy, the difference between a brigadier general and a sergeant major was about the same as the difference between a four-course meal at a snooty restaurant and an all-you-can-eat buffet. Recruits like me were strictly fast food, complete with an oversized side of fries. But it wasn't that simple. It never was. Rita was U.S. military, the linchpin of the upcoming operation, and one of the most important soldiers on the face of the planet. Rank aside, it was hard to say which one of them really held more power. Rita stood in silence. The brigadier general was the first to speak. "Yes, Sergeant." "Sir, would it be possible for me to join the PT, sir?" The same high voice from my dream, speaking in perfectly intoned burst. "You have a major operation coming up tomorrow." "So do they, sir. My squad has never participated in this form of PT, sir. I believe my participation could be vital in ensuring the successful coordination and execution of tomorrow's joint operation." The general was at a loss for words. The U.S. Special Forces around the field started to whoop and cheer. "Request permission to participate in the PT, sir," she said. "Granted." "Sir, thank you, sir." She flashed a quick salute. Doing an about-face, she slipped among the rows of men staring intently into the ground. She chose a spot beside me and started her ISO push-up. I could feel the heat coming off her body through the chilly air between us. I didn't move. Rita didn't move. The sun hung high in the sky, showering its rays over us, slowly roasting our skin. A drop of sweat formed in my armpit, then traced its way slowly to the ground. Sweat had started to bead on Rita's skin, too. Fuck! I felt like a chicken crammed into the same oven as the Christmas turkey. Rita's lips made the subtlest of movements.
A low voice only I could hear. "Do I have something on my face?" "What?" "You've been staring at me for a while now." "Me? No. I thought maybe there was a laser bead on my forehead." "Sorry, there wasn't. It's nothing." "Oh, all right."
Ship for brains carrier, you're slipping!
The lieutenant barked. I quickly extended my arm back into position. Beside me, Rita Vrataski, with the disinterested expression of someone who'd never had a need for human contact her entire life, continued her ISO push-up. PT ended less than an hour later. The general, the taste of bile in his mouth forgotten, returned to the barracks without further instructions. The 17th Company had spent a productive pre-battle afternoon. It hadn't played out the way I remembered it. In my dream, I never made eye contact with Rita, and she hadn't joined the PT. Maybe I was reading too much into things, but I'd say she did it just to piss the general off. It took a Valkyrie reborn to throw a monkey wrench into a disciplinary training session planned with military precision and get away with it. Then again, her antenna may just have picked up something that made her want to see what this weird ISO push-up thing was all about. Maybe she had just been curious. One thing was for sure, though. Rita Vrataski wasn't the bitch everyone made her out to be.
How about last night, huh?
Oh, sorry, 4.
How about last night, huh? That shit was tight.
You said it.
With reflexes like that, that girl must be hiding springs in that little body of hers. I could feel it all the way into my abs.
She hears you talking like that. Best watch out.
Who doesn't like a compliment? I'm just saying she was good.
As he spoke, Yonabaru thrust his hips. Seeing someone move like that in a jacket was pretty damn funny. An everyday gesture with enough power behind it to level a house. Our platoon was on the northern tip of Koto-Iushi. Oh my. Oh, and now it's misspelled. I think. Oh no, they changed the spelling on me. Is it a different island or is it the same one? Oh no. Okay, so, where are you? Where is the previous spelling? Let me. Now I think I'm going crazy. Which would be really funny. I mean, okay. That's one reference. Let me find a second reference. Looking for capital K's. There it is. Okay, Kotoiushi Island. Kotoiushi Island. Kotoishui Island. Oh no. I'm going to assume it's still supposed to be Kotoiushi as opposed to whatever this one is. Dude, that's the wrong page. Kotoishui. Kotoiushi. 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 Not this other thing. Maybe that's why I got thrown off. Okay. Our platoon was on the northern tip of Kotoiushi Island, waiting to spring the ambush, jackets in sleep mode. A screen about half a meter tall stood in front of us, projecting an image of the terrain behind. It's what they called active camouflage. It was supposed to render us undetectable from an enemy looking at us head on. Of course, we could have just used a painting. The terrain had been bombed into oblivion, so any direction you looked, all you saw was the same charred wasteland. Most of the time, the mimics lurked in caves that twisted deep under the seabed. Before a ground assault, we fired bunker buster bombs that penetrated into the ground before detonating. Eat that. Each one of those babies cost more than I'd make in my entire lifetime. But the mimics had an uncanny way of avoiding the bombs. It was enough to make you wonder if they were getting a copy of our attack plans in advance. On paper, we may have had air superiority, but we ended up in a drawn-out land war anyhow. Since our platoon was part of an ambush, we weren't packing the large-bore cannons, massive weapons that were each the size of a small car fully assembled. What we did have were 20mm rifles, fuel-air grenades, pile drivers, and rocket launchers loaded with 3 rounds apiece. Since it was Farrell's platoon, we were all linked to him via comm. I glanced at my jacket's HUD. It was 28 degrees Celsius. Pressure was 1014 millibars. The primary strike force would be on the move any minute. Last night, after that endless hour of PT, I'd decided to go to the party. It wasn't what I remembered doing from the dream, but I didn't really feel like rereading that book. The part about helping Yonabaru up to his bunk after he stumbled back to the barracks stayed the same. Word around the platoon was that Yonabaru's girlfriend was a jacket jockey too. With the exception of special forces, men and women fought in separate platoons, so we wouldn't have run into her on the battlefield anyway. If, and I'm just talking, but if one of you got killed, I ventured.
I'd feel like shit.
But you still see each other anyway.
Heaven ain't some Swiss bank. You can't squirrel away money in some secret account up there and expect to make a withdrawal. You gotta do what you can before going into battle. That's the first rule of soldiering.
Yeah, I guess.
But I'm telling you, you gotta hook yourself up with some pussy. Carpe diem, brother.
Carpe something.
What about Mad Wargarita? Y'all were talking during PT, right? You'd tap that, I know you would.
Don't even go there.
Tiny girl like her, I bet she's a wolverine in the sack. The smaller they are, the better they fuck, you know.
Show some respect.
Sex ain't got nothing to do with respect. From the lowest peon to His Majesty the General, everybody wants to do a little pounding between the legs. All I'm saying is that's how we evolved.
Just shut the fuck up, I said.
That ain't way to talk to me in front of the sergeant. I'm hurt. I've got a very sensitive disposition. I'm just talking trash to keep my mind off things, same as everyone else.
He's right, someone else chipped in over the comm link.
Hey, don't I get a vote?
Oh, sorry. Hey, don't I get a vote? It was like this was the excuse everyone in the platoon had been waiting for. Everyone started talking at once.
I'm gonna have to cast my ballot for Yonabaru.
I've set this thing to filter out your jokes, so stop wasting your breath.
Sounds like Kiria's gonna have to step up his training if he doesn't want Yonabaru to take the piss out of him so easy.
Sir, I think I need to reboot my jacket, sir. I don't want it crashing during the battle.
Oh, man, I'd kill for a cigarette. Must have left them in my other jacket. I thought you quit smoking. Hey, keep it down. I'm trying to get some sleep.
And so it went. Back and forth through the comlink, like it was an internet chat room. All Farrell could do was sigh and shake his jacketed head. When you're so nervous you've run out of nails to bite, thinking about something you enjoy helps take the pressure off. They taught us that in training, too. Of course, you get a bunch of animals like these together, pretty much the only thing they think about is sex. There was only one girl I could think about, my sweet little librarian, whose face I could hardly picture anymore. Who knew what she was doing? It had been half a year since she got married. She was probably knocked up by now. I enlisted right after I graduated from high school, and she broke my heart. I don't think the two things were related. Who can say? I had signed up thinking I could make some sense of this fucked up world by betting my life in battle and seeing what fate dealt me. Boy, was I ever green. If I was tea green now, I must have been lime green back then. Turns out my life isn't even worth enough to buy one of those pricey bombs, and what cards fate has dealt me don't have any rhyme or reason.
Nuts to this. If we're not gonna dig trenches, can we at least sit?
Can't hide if we're digging trenches.
This active camouflage ain't good for shit. Who's to say they don't see better than we do anyhow? They ain't supposed to be able to see the attack choppers either, but they knock 'em out of the sky like balloons in a shooting gallery. Made for a hell of a time at Okinawa. If we run into the enemy, I'll be sure to give him an eye test. I still say the trench is man's greatest invention. My kingdom for a trench. You can dig all the trenches you want once we get back. My orders. Oh, you can dig all the trenches you want once we get back. My orders. Isn't that how they torture prisoners? My pension to the man who invents a way to fasten your... Shit, it started. Oh. My pension to the man who invents a way to fasten your... Shit, it started. Don't get your balls blown off, gents, Farrell shouted. Maybe he should be British, I don't know. My pension to the man who invents a way to fasten your... Shit, it started. Don't get your balls blown off, gents, Farrell shouted. The din of battle filled the air. I could feel the shudder of distant shells exploding. I turned my attention to Yonabaru. After what happened in PT, maybe my dream was just a dream, but if Yonabaru died by my side at the beginning of the battle, I'd never forgive myself. I replayed the events of my dream in my head. The javelin had come from 2 o'clock. It had flown right through the camouflage screen, leaving it in tatters, all about a minute after the battle started, give or take. I tensed my body, ready to be knocked down at any moment. My arms were shaking. An itch developed in the small of my back. A wrinkle in my inner suit pressed against my side. What are they waiting for? The first round didn't hit Yonabaru. The shot that was supposed to have killed him was headed for me instead. I didn't have time to move a millimeter. I'll never forget the sight of that enemy javelin flying straight at me. Five. The paperback I'd been reading was beside my pillow. It was a mystery novel about an American detective who was supposed to be some sort of expert on the Orient. I had my index finger wedged into a scene where all the key players meet for dinner at a Japanese restaurant in New York. Without rising, I looked carefully around the barracks. Nothing had changed. The swimsuit pin-up still had the Prime Minister's head. The radio with a busted bass grated out music from the top bunk. From beyond the grave, a singer admonished us against crying over a lost love. After waiting to be sure the DJ would read the weather report in her bubblegum voice, oh, it's a female DJ, I sat up. I shifted my weight as I sat on the edge of the bed. I pinched my arm as hard as I could. The spot I pinched started to turn red. It hurt like a bitch. Tears blurred my vision. Geiji, sign this. Yonabaru craned his neck over the side of the top bunk. Ellipsis. What's the matter? Still asleep? Nah. You need my signature? Sure. Yonabaru disappeared from view. Mind if I ask something a little weird? What? I just need you to sign on the dotted line. His voice came from over the bed frame. Don't need you to write anything else. No funny drawings of the lieutenant on the back or nothing. Why would I do that? I don't know. It's what I did the first time I signed it. Don't start comparing. Forget it. What I wanted to ask was, the attack's tomorrow, right? Sure. That's not the kind of thing they go changing up. You've never heard of anyone reliving the same day over and over, have you? There was a pause before he replied. You sure you're awake? The day after yesterday's today. The day after today is tomorrow. If it didn't work like that, we'd never get to Christmas or Valentine's Day. Then we'd be fucked. Or not. Yeah, right. Listen, there's nothing to tomorrow's operation. Right. Sweat it too much, you'll turn into a feed head. End up losing your mind before they even get a chance to blow your brains out. I stared blankly at the aluminum piping of the bed frame. When I was a kid, the war against the mimics had already started. Instead of cowboys and Indians or cops and robbers, we fought aliens using toy guns that fired spring-loaded plastic bullets. They stung a little when they hit, but that was all. Even up close, they barely hurt. I always played the hero, taking the hit for the team. I'd spring out courageously into the line of fire, absorbing one bullet after another. I did a little jump with each successive hit, performing an impromptu interpretive dance. I was really good at it.
Inspired by the hero's death, his comrades would launch a bold counterattack. With his noble sacrifice, he'd ensured humanity's salvation. Victory would be declared, and the kids who'd been the bad guys would come back to the human side, and everyone would celebrate. There was no game like it. Pretending to be a hero slain in battle was one thing. Dying a hero in a real war was another. As I got older, I understood the difference, and I knew I didn't want to die. Not even in a dream. Some nightmares you can't wake up from, no matter how many times you try. Me, I was trapped in a nightmare, and no matter how many times I woke up, I was still trapped. That I knew I was caught in a loop I couldn't break out of. That I knew I was caught in a loop I couldn't break out of was the worst part of all. I fought back panic. But was it really happening to me again? The same day I'd already lived through twice was unfolding again around me. Or maybe it was all a nightmare after all. Of course things would be happening the way I remembered them. It was all in my head, so why not? This was ridiculous. I punched the mattress. Had I dreamed that black point flying at me? Was the javelin that shattered my breastplate and pierced my chest all in my head? Had I imagined the blood, the coughing up bits of lung? Let me tell you what happens when your lungs are crushed. You drown not in water, but in air. Gasp as hard as you like, crushed lungs can't pass the oxygen your body needs to your bloodstream. All around you, your friends are breathing in and out without a second thought, while you drown alone in a sea of air. I never knew this until it happened to me. I'd never even heard about it. I definitely hadn't made that up. It really happened. It didn't matter if I never told anyone, if no one ever believed me. It would still be true. The sensation it had imprinted on my mind was proof enough of that. Pain that shoots through your body like a bolt of lightning. Legs so damn heavy it feels like they've been stuffed with sandbags. Terror so strong it crushes your heart. That's not the stuff of imagination and dreams. I wasn't sure how, but I'd been killed. Twice. No doubt about it. I didn't mind listening to Yonabaru tell some story I'd already heard before. Hell, I'd do that 10 times, 100. The more the better. Our daily routines were all filled with that same repetitive shit. But going into battle? No thanks. If I stayed here, I'd be killed. Whether I died before or after Yonabaru didn't really matter. There was no way I could survive that firefight. I had to get away. I had to be anywhere but here. Even saints have limits to their patience, and I was no saint. I'd never been one to blindly believe in God, Buddha, any of that shit, but if somebody up there was going to give me a third chance, I wasn't about to let it go to waste. If I sat here staring up at the top bunk, the only future I had ended in a body bag. If I didn't want to die, I had to move. Move first, think later, just like they taught us in training. If today was a repetition of yesterday, Farrell would be around any minute. The first time he showed up, I'd been taking a dump. The second, I'd been chatting it up with Yonabaru. After that, we'd be off to a ridiculous session of PT, and we'd come back exhausted. That got me thinking. Everyone in the 17th Armored would be in that PT. Not only that, everyone else on the base with time on their hands would be gathered around the field to watch. I couldn't have asked for a better chance to sneak out of the base. Considering how tired I'd be after training, it was the only chance I was likely to get. If I hurt myself, that would probably do it. They wouldn't send a wounded soldier to PT. I needed an injury that looked bad enough to get me out of PT, but nothing so bad it would lay me up. A man with even a shallow scalp wound would gush blood like a stuck pig. It was one of the first things they taught us in first aid. At the time, I wondered what good first aid or anything else would do after a mimic javelin had sliced off your head and sent it flying through the air, but I guess you never know when a little piece of knowledge will come in handy. I had to get started quick. Fuck! I had a whole day to repeat, but I didn't have enough time when I needed it. That block-headed sergeant was on his way. Move, move!
What's all that noise down there?
Yonabaru asked casually. I gotta head out for a minute.
Head out? Hey, I need your signature.
I dove into the space between the bunks without even bothering to tie my shoes. Concrete slapping under my feet, I turned just before hitting the poster of the girl in the swimsuit. I darted past the guy with the porno mag lying on his bed. I wasn't headed anywhere in particular. Right then, my top priority was making sure I didn't run into Farrell. I had to get somewhere out of sight where I could hurt myself, then show up covered in blood around the time Yonabaru and Farrell were finishing their conversation. For a plan I'd cooked up on the fly, it wasn't half bad. Shit. I should have brought the combat knife I kept under my pillow. It was useless against mimics, but for opening cans or cutting through wood or cloth, it was something no self-respecting soldier should be without. I'd cut myself with that knife 1,000 times during training. I wouldn't have had any trouble making a scalp wound with it. I'd made it out the entrance of the barracks, and I wanted to put as much space between me and HQ as possible. I let my speed slacken as I rounded the corner of the building. There was a woman there. Terrible timing. She grunted as she pushed a cart piled high with potatoes. I knew her. Rachel Kisaragi, a civilian posted over in cafeteria number 2. A snow-white bandana, neatly folded into a triangle, covered her black, wavy hair. She had healthy, tanned skin and larger-than-average breasts. Her waist was narrow. Of the 3 types of women the human race boasted, the pretty, the homely, and the gorillas you couldn't do anything with save ship 'em off to the army, I'd put her in the pretty category without batting an eye. In a war that had already lasted 20 years, there just wasn't enough money for all the military support staff to be government employees. Even at a base on the front lines, they filled as many non-combatant roles with civilians as they could. The Diet had already debated the possibility of handing over the transport of war materiel in non-combat zones to the private sector. People joked that at this rate it wouldn't be long before they'd outsource the fighting to civilians and be done with the whole thing. I'd heard that Rachel was more of a nutritionist than a cook. The only reason I recognized her was that Yonabaru had been chasing her skirt before he hooked up with his current squeeze. Apparently, she didn't like guys who were too forward, which pretty much ruled out Yonabaru. I smirked at the thought, and a mountain of potatoes slammed into me. Desperately, I stuck out my right foot to catch my balance, but I slipped on one of the potatoes and went sprawling on my ass. An avalanche of spuds pummeled my face, one after the other, the eager jabs of a rookie boxer on his way to the World Heavyweight Championship. The metal cart delivered the finishing blow, a hard right straight to my temple. I collapsed to the ground with a thud sufficiently resounding to give a fuel air grenade a run for its money. It was a while before I could even breathe.
Are you all right?
I groaned. At least it looked like none of the potatoes had hit Rachel.
I think so. Sorry about that. I can't really see where I'm going when pushing this thing.
Nah, it's not your fault. I jumped out right in front of you.
Hey, don't I know you?
Rachel peered down at poor, flattened me with her green eyes. A sheepish grin spread across my face. Looks like we ran into each other again.
I knew it. You're the new recruit in the 17th.
Yeah, sorry for all the trouble, I said. A spud rolled off my belly. With a hand on her hip, Rachel surveyed the damage. Her delicate eyebrows sank.
Couldn't have spread them out further if you tried.
Sorry.
It's their fault for being so round.
She arched her back slightly so her chest stuck out. It was, hard to ignore. I guess.
You ever see potatoes that round?
I hadn't. Not among the tubers littering the floor, either.
Shouldn't take that long to grab them, if you help.
No, I mean, yeah.
Well, which is it?
The clock was ticking. If I wasn't out of here now, I'd be dead tomorrow. I didn't have time to stand around grabbing potatoes, or anything else for that matter. But something else was kicking in. An attraction I'd felt for this girl since the first time I'd met her, right after my posting at the base. I sat there on the ground, stalling and pretending to be in pain. I was just about to give her my answer when I heard the sound of precisely measured footsteps approaching from behind.
What are you doing?
Came a growl like a hound from the gates of hell. Feral. He'd appeared from around the corner of the barracks and was now surveying the potatoes strewn across the concrete path with disapproval.
I, I was pushing my cart and...
This your mess, Kyria?
Sir, yes, sir! I scrambled to my feet. A wave of vertigo washed over me. He rolled his eyes and fixed his gaze on me. Sir?
You're hurt. Let me take a look.
It's nothing. I'll be fine. Farrell stepped closer and touched my head, right at the hairline. A sharp pain shot across my scalp. His sausage-like fingers pried open the wound. Warm blood spurted from my forehead to the beat of an unseen rock band. The stream ran lazily down the side of my nose, touched the corner of my mouth, then hung briefly on the tip of my chin until a steady drip, drip, drip began. A rose of fresh blood blossomed on the concrete. The sharp smell of iron filled my nostrils. Rachel gasped.
Nice clean entry wound. What did you hit it on?
Rachel stepped in.
My cart fell over. I'm sorry.
Is that how it happened?
Actually, I'm the one who ran into her, but yeah, pretty much.
Right. Well, it's not as bad as it looks. You'll be fine,
Farrell said, giving the back of my head a playful slap. A spray of blood flew from my brow, staining my shirt. Leaving me where I was, he walked over to the corner of the barracks and shouted, loud enough to scare the cicadas off the walls,
Yonabaru, get your butt out here! There's some soldiering needs doing. I'm here to... Oh, morning, Rachel. Sergeant, another fine day in the Corps, I trust. So fine it looks like the concrete up in sprouted potatoes. Shut your pie hole and get some men out here to pick these up. Oh, me? Well, he's not going to be picking up anything, is he?
Farrell nodded in my direction. Yonabaru gaped.
Dude, what hit you? You look like you went 20 in the cage with a 300-pound Irishman.
To the sergeant.
Wait, that means Cagey's the only one... That means Cagey's the one who knocked all these over.
Wait a minute. There's a question mark there. To the sergeant.
Wait, that means Cagey's the one who knocked all these over?
Back to me.
Hell of a way to start the day, going and ruining a guy's morning like that.
What's the matter? Don't you want to help?
Don't be silly. For you, I'd pick up anything. Potatoes, pumpkins, landmines. Enough. Is there anyone in this lousy excuse for a platoon whose head isn't lodged securely up his asshole? Oh, that hurts, Sarge. You watch. I'll bring the hardest working men in the 17th. Curious, quit standing around like a scarecrow and get your butt over to the infirmary. You're excused from today's PT. PT? Who said anything about PT? I did. Somebody stepped in a knee-deep pile of pig shit in the PX last night. Now, that may not have anything to do with you, but nevertheless, at 0900, you're going to assemble at the #1 training field in your 4th-tier equipment for physical training. Oh, you gotta be kidding. We're going into battle tomorrow and you're sending us off for PT? That's an order, Corporal. Sir, we'll report to the #1 training field at 0900 in full 4th-tier equipment, sir. But one thing, Sarge, we've been doing that liquor raid for years. Why give us a hard time about it now? You really want to know?
Farrell rolled his eyes. Leaving the conversation I'd heard before behind, I escaped to the infirmary. Six. I was standing at the gate that divided the base from the outside world. The guard who checked my ID raised his eyebrows doubtfully. There was an extra layer of security on the base thanks to the U.S. crew's visit. Although the Japanese Corps oversaw general base security, the balance of power with the U.S. prevented them from interfering with anything under U.S. jurisdiction. Luckily, U.S. security didn't have any interest in anyone that wasn't one of their own. Without leave papers from a commanding officer, KG Kiria wasn't getting off the base. But the U.S. soldiers could come and go as they pleased, and all they had to do was flash an ID. Everyone used the same gate, so if I got an American guard, he might let me through, no questions asked. All they cared about was keeping undesirables away from their precious Special Forces squad. A recruit trying to go AWOL wasn't likely to catch their eye. The guard must not have seen many Japanese ID cards because he stared at mine for a long time. The machine that checked IDs just logged who passed through the gate. No need to panic. Why would they change the system up the day before an attack? The muscles in my stomach tensed. The guard was looking back and forth between me and my card, comparing the blurry picture with my face. The cut on my temple burned. The sawbones who tended to me in the infirmary gave me 3 stitches without any painkiller. Ow! Now it was sending searing bolts of electricity shooting through my body. The bones in my knee creaked. I was unarmed. I missed my knife, warm and snug under my pillow. If I had it with me, I could lock this guy in a half Nelson and... Thinking like that wasn't going to get me anywhere. I stretched my back. Gotta stay cool. If he stares at you, stare right back. Stifling a yawn, the guard pressed the button to open the gate. The doorway to freedom creaked open. I turned slowly to look back as I slipped past the yellow bar. There, in the distance, was the training field. The sea breeze, heavy with the scent of the ocean, blew across the field toward the gate. On the other side of the fence, soldiers the size of ants performed tiny, miniature squats. They were the soldiers I'd eaten with and trained with. They were my friends in the 17th. I swallowed the nostalgia that rose up in me. I walked unhurried, the moist wind blowing against my body. Keep walking until you're out of sight of the guard. Don't run. Just a little farther. Turn the corner. I broke into a sprint. Once I started running, I didn't stop. It was 15 clicks from the base to Tateyama, a nearby entertainment district. Even if I took a roundabout route, it would be 20 clicks at most. Once I was there, I could change my clothes and lay in the supplies I needed. I couldn't risk trains or the highway, but once I hit Chiba City, I would be home free. Neither the army nor the police stuck their noses in the underground malls turned slums there. It was about 8 hours until Squad 1830's meeting. That's when they'd probably figure out I'd gone AWOL. I didn't know if they'd send cars or choppers after me, but by dusk I planned to be just another face in the crowd. I remembered the training we'd done at the foot of Mount Fuji. 60-kilometer marches in full gear. Crossing the Boso Peninsula in half a day wouldn't be a problem. By the time tomorrow's battle started, I'd be far away from days that repeat themselves and the brutal deaths they ended in. The sun hung high in the sky, washing me in blinding light. 57mm automatic guns sat covered in white tarps at 100-meter intervals along the seawall. Red-brown streaks of rust marred the antique steel plates at their base. The guns had been installed along the entire coastline when the mimics reached the mainland. As a kid, when I'd first laid eyes on those guns, I thought they were the coolest things I'd ever seen. The black lacquer finish of their steel instilled an unreasonable sense of confidence in me. Now that I'd seen real battle, I knew with cool certainty that weapons like these could never repel a mimic attack. These guns moved like the dinosaurs they were. They couldn't hope to land a hit on a mimic. What a joke. They still had service crews assigned to these that came out and inspected them once a week. Bureaucracy loves waste. Maybe humanity would lose. The thought came to me out of the blue, but I couldn't shake it. When I told my parents I'd enlisted, they'd wanted me to join the Coast Guard. They said I'd still get a chance to fight without going into battle. They said I'd still get a chance. Oh, you're repeating yourself. That I'd be performing the vital task of defending the cities where people worked and lived. But I didn't want to fight the mimics to save humanity. I'd seen my fill of that in the movies. I could search my soul till my body fell to dust around it, and I'd never find the desire to do great things like saving the human race. What I found instead was a wire puzzle that you couldn't solve no matter how many times you tried. Something buried under a pile of puzzle pieces that didn't fit. It pissed me off. I was weak. I couldn't even get the woman I loved, the librarian, to look me in the eye. I thought the irresistible tide of war would change me, forge me into something that worked. I may have fooled myself into believing I'd find the last piece of the puzzle I needed to complete Keiji Kirya on the battlefield. But I never wanted to be a hero loved by millions. Not for a minute. If I could convince the few friends I had that I was someone who could do something in this world, who could leave a mark, no matter how small, that would be enough. And look where that got me. What had half a year of training done for me? I now possessed a handful of skills that weren't good for shit in a real battle and six-pack abs. I was still weak, and the world was still fucked. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. It took me this long to realize the obvious. Ironic that I had to run away from the army before I figured it out. The beach was deserted. The Coast Guard must have been busy evacuating this place over the past 6 months. After a little less than an hour of running, I planted myself on the edge of the seawall. I'd covered about 8 kilometers, putting me about halfway to Tateyama. My sand-colored shirt was dark with sweat. The gauze wrapped around my head was coming loose. A gentle sea breeze, refreshing after that hot wind that had swept across the base, caressed the back of my neck. If it weren't for the machine guns, props stolen from some long-forgotten anime, intruding on the real world, it would have been the very picture of a tropical resort. The beach was littered with the husks of spent firework rockets, the crude kind you put together and launch with a plastic tube. No one would be crazy enough to come this close to a military base to set off fireworks. They must have been left by some bastard on the feed trying to warn the mimics about the attack on Boso Peninsula. There were anti-war activists out there who were convinced the mimics were intelligent creatures, and they were trying to open a line of communication with them. Ain't democracy grand? Thanks to global warming, this whole strip of beach was below sea level when the tide came in. By dusk, these fucking tubes would be washed away by the sea and forgotten. No one would ever know. I kicked one of the melted tubes as hard as I could.
Well, what's this? A soldier?
I spun around. It had been a while since I'd heard anyone speak Japanese. I'd been so lost in my thoughts I didn't realize anyone had come up behind me. Two figures, an elderly man and a little girl, stood atop the embankment. The old man's skin would have made fine pickle brine if you set it out in a jar on a bright day like today. In his left hand he clutched a three-pronged metal spear right out of a fairy tale. What's he doing with a trident? The girl, she looked about the right age to be in elementary school, squeezed his right hand tightly. Half hidden behind the man's leg, the girl looked up at me unabashedly from under her straw hat. The face beneath the hat was too white to have spent much time cooking under the sun.
You're an unfamiliar face.
I'm from the Flower Line base. Damn it, I'd run my mouth before my brain.
Ah,
What, brings you two out here?
sea is fish waiting to be caught. Family's all going up to Tokyo.
What happened to the Coast Guard?
Word come about the whooping we took down on Okinawa. Why, they all up and left. If the army can take them croakers for us, we'd breathe easier, that's for sure.
I'm not just doing a patois there, by the way. That's like the Yorn and unfamiliar face, for instance. That's YOURN space AN space UNF apostrophe MILYAR face.
You're an unfamiliar face.
So they are putting forth a vibe, as it were. Um, he probably has something like a rural or Kansai dialect, and that is traditionally rendered in an English dub as something vaguely southern for reasons.
Word come about the whooping we took down on Okinawa. Why, they all up and left. If the army can take care of them croakers for us, we'd breathe easier, that's for sure.
Yeah, croakers was obviously some local slang for mimics. Ordinary people never got the chance to see a mimic with their own eyes. At best, they'd catch a glimpse of a rotting corpse washed up on the beach, or maybe one that had gotten caught in a fishing net and died. But with the conductive sand washed away by the ocean, all that would remain would be empty husks. That's why a lot of people thought mimics were some type of amphibian that shed its skin. I only caught about 70% of what the old man said, but I heard enough to know that the Coast Guard had pulled out of the area. Our defeat at Okinawa must have been more serious than I thought. Bad enough for them to recall our combined forces up and down the Uchibo line. Uchibo line. Everyone had been redeployed with a focus on major cities and industrial areas. The old man smiled and nodded. The girl watched him with eyes as wide as saucers, witness to some rare spectacle. He put a lot of hope in the UDF troops stationed at Flower Line Base. Not that I had signed up to defend him or anyone else for that matter. Still, it made me feel bad.
You got any smoke, son? Since the military left, can't hardly come by none.
Sorry, I don't smoke.
Well, then don't you worry none.
The old man stared out at the sea. There weren't many soldiers in the armored infantry who suffered from nicotine addiction, probably because you couldn't smoke during battle when you needed it the most. I stood silent. I didn't want to do or say anything stupid. I couldn't let him find out I was a deserter. They shot deserters. Escaping the mimics just to be killed by the army didn't make much sense. The girl tugged at the man's hand.
She tires out real easy. Good eyes on her, though. Been born a boy, she'd have been quite a fisherman.
Yeah,
Just one thing 'fore I go. Ain't never seen anything like this. Came running out of my house quick as I might. Found you here. What do you make of it? Anything to do with them croakers?
he raised his arm. My eyes followed the gnarled twigs of his fingers as he pointed. The water had turned green. Not the emerald green you'd see off the shore of some island in the South Pacific, but a frothy, turbid green, as if a supertanker filled with green tea ice cream had run aground and spilled its cargo into the bay. A dead fish floated on the waves, a bright fleck of silver. I recognized that green. I'd seen it on the monitors during training. Mimics ate soil just like earthworms. But unlike earthworms, the soil they passed through their bodies and excreted was toxic to other life. The land the mimics fed on died and turned to desert. The seas turned a milky green.
Ain't like no red tide I e'er seen.
A high-pitched scream filled the air. My head rang to its familiar tune. Eyebrows still knitted, the old man's head traced an arc as it sailed through the sky. The shattered pieces of his jaw and neck painted the girl's straw hat a vivid red. She didn't realize what had happened. A javelin exits a mimic's body at 1,200 meters per second. The old man's skull went flying before the sound of the javelin had even reached us. She slowly looked up. A second round sliced through the air. Before her large, dark eyes could take in the sight of her slain grandfather, the javelin ripped through her, an act of neither mercy nor spite. Her small body was obliterated. Buffeted by the blast, the old man's headless body swayed. Half his body was stained a deep scarlet. The straw hat spun on the wind. My body recoiled. I couldn't move. A bloated frog corpse stood at the water's edge. This coast was definitely within the UDF defense perimeter. I hadn't heard reports of any patrol boats being sunk. The base on the front was alive and well. There couldn't be any mimics here. A claim the two corpses lying beside me would surely have contested if they could. But they were dead, right before my eyes, and I, their one hope for defense, had just deserted the only military unit in the area capable of holding back this invasion. I was unarmed. My knife, my gun, my jacket, they were all back at the base. When I'd walked through that gate an hour ago, I'd left my only hope for defense behind. 30 meters to the nearest 57mm gun. Within running distance. I knew how to fire one, but there was still the tarp to deal with. I'd never have time to get it off. Insert my ID card into the platform, key in my passcode, feed in a 30-kilometer ammo belt, release the rotation lock lever or the barrel won't move, and I can't aim, climb into the seat, crank the rusted handle. Fuck it. Fire, motherfucker, fire! I knew the power of a mimic. They weighed several times as much as a fully geared jacket jockey. Structurally, they had a lot in common with a starfish. There was an endoskeleton just below the skin, and it took 50mm armor-piercing rounds or better to penetrate it. And they didn't hold back just because a man was unarmed. They rolled right through you like a rototiller through a gopher mound. Fuck me. The first javelin pierced my thigh. The second opened a gaping wound in my back. I was too busy trying to keep down the organs that came gurgling up into my throat to even notice the third. I blacked out. Seven. The paperback I'd been reading was beside my pillow. Yonabaru was counting his bundle of confessions on the top bunk.
Hey, Keiji, sign this.
Corporal, you have a sidearm, don't you?
Yeah?
Could I see it?
Since when are you a gun nut?
It's not like that. His hand disappeared into the top bunk. When it returned, it clutched a glistening lump of black metal.
It's loaded, so watch where you point it.
Right.
If you make corporal, you can bring your own toys to bed, and ain't nobody can say a thing about it. Pea shooter like this ain't no good against a mimic anyhow. The only things a jacket jockey needs are his 20mm and his rocket launcher, 3 rockets apiece. The banana he packs for a snack doesn't count. Now would you sign this already?
I was too busy flicking off the safety on the gun to answer. I wrapped my mouth around the barrel, imagining that 9mm slug in the chamber waiting to explode from the cold, hard steel. I pulled the trigger. 8. The paperback I'd been reading was beside my pillow. I sighed.
Hey, Keiji, sign this.
Yonabaru craned his neck down from the top bunk. Sir, yes, sir.
Listen, there's nothing to tomorrow's operation. Sweat it too much, you'll turn into a feedhead. End up losing your mind before they even get a chance to blow your brains out.
I'm not sweating anything.
Hey, man, it ain't nothing to be ashamed of. Everyone's nervous the first time. It's like getting laid. Until you've done the deed, you can't get it out of your head. All you can do is pass the time jerking off.
I disagree.
Hey, you're talking to a man who's played the game.
What if, just hypothetically, you kept repeating your first time over and over?
Where'd you get that shit?
I'm just talking hypothetically is all, like resetting all the pieces on a chessboard. You take your turn, then everything goes back to how it started.
It depends.
Still hanging from the top bunk, his face lit up.
You talking about fucking or fighting?
No fucking.
Well, if they ask me to go back and fight at Okinawa again, I'd tell them to shove it up their asses. They could send me to a fucking firing squad if they want, but I would not go back.
What if you didn't have a choice? What if you had to relive your execution again and again? At the end of the day, every man has to wipe his own ass. There's no one to make your decisions for you either. And whatever situation you're in, that's just another factor in your decision. Which isn't to say everybody gets the same range of choices as everybody else. If there's one guy out there with an ace in the hole, there's sure to be another who's been dealt a handful of shit. Sometimes you run into a dead end. But you walked each step of the road that led you there on your own. Even when they string you up on the gallows, you have the choice to meet your death with dignity or go kicking and screaming into the hereafter. But I didn't get that choice. There could be a giant waterfall just beyond Tateyama, the edge of the whole damn world, and I'd never know it. Day after day, I go back and forth between the base and the battlefield, where I'm squashed like a bug crawling on the ground. So long as the wind blows, I'm born again, and I die. I can't take anything with me to my next life. The only things I get to keep are my solitude, a fear that no one can understand, and the feel of the trigger against my finger. It's a fucked up world, with fucked up rules. So fuck it. I took a pen from beside my pillow and wrote the number 5 on the back of my left hand. My battle begins with this number. Let's see how much I can take with me. So what if the world hands me a pile of shit? I'll comb through it for the corn. I'll dodge enemy bullets by a hair's breadth. I'll slaughter mimics with a single blow. If Rita Vrataski is a goddess on the battlefield, I'll watch and learn until I can match her kill for kill. I have all the time in the world. Nothing better to do. Who knows? Maybe something will change. Or maybe I'll find a way to take this fucking world and piss in its eye. That'd be just fine by me. And with that grim and edgy beginning, we have the first chapter of All You Need Is Kill. Sorry about the technical issue in the middle. I don't know why it happened. I don't know what's going on with my network. Possibly they're doing telephone pole maintenance like they were last week. I hope not. But it's pretty frustrating when you sort of depend on a sense of consistency. It's not too bad once I have the playlists set up and set in chronological order, but it means it's more episodes that I have to finagle around. Anyway, um, that'll do it for today. Later this week, we've got the next chunk of The Three Body Problem by Shijin Liu on Friday. And on Wednesday, I may or may not have the things set up that I wanted to have set up. I'm having lots of second thoughts. So instead, we may just get right started. We might do another chunk of the Three Body Problem that way, because since this is like the second of 7 books that I've got to pound through, and I'm going to be doing that well into next year regardless. The faster, the better. Next week, without fail, we will be doing on Wednesdays Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, though. That'll be our October spooky reading for Wordy Wednesdays. So you can look forward to that. I have to measure out just how long that's going to wind up taking, because I don't actually know. That's 42 pages. That's probably like 50. Yeah, we can do that in a month. We can probably do that in a month. No problem. Anyway, we'll figure it out. So yeah, sorry about the roughness. Sorry about my seething rage at things not working as they're supposed to. I try not to be salty, but sometimes, all you want is it to go without a hitch, and it won't. Anyway, until mañana, or the day after mañana, bye. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other. See you next time.